And we were all sort of trying to argue that like maybe it was a little bit culty, but like we personally weren't in the cult. And I was definitely doing that.
That was Phoebe Pincus, COO at Startmate and co-founder of the Cheeky Run Club. This episode also marks the start of a new structure for Execs Who Run, where the main section of the episode dives deep into one theme that guests could talk about for hours. With Phoebe, this theme was how running builds discipline and self-confidence. We also get into her always swim mantra, why running might just be a cult, and how the lessons from training carry straight into leadership and life. You are listening to Execs Who Run, the show on life, leadership, and the miles in between. I am your host, Jason Hunt. Now let's dive in. Welcome along to the show, Phoebe. How are we doing?
Thank you. I am doing really well, thank you. How are you?
I am good. The sun is shining. In fact, you're actually in Sydney, and I think you're in Sydney one of the first days for honestly like months that
Everyone's
been
been
raining.
saying that. Everyone's been saying
Yeah.
that. And I feel like, for months, all my Sydney friends and colleagues have been complaining about the weather. And then I got up here and I was like, guys, what are you complaining about? This is lovely.
Yeah, no, it's certainly turned a corner, and it looks like it's going to stay like this. So we're just going to hold that
How
in
good.
the universe and hope. I'm quite excited about this one, and I think for a few reasons. We have a lot of similarities. For a start, we both have a running podcast, which is I don't know, that says probably a lot in itself, and Cheeky Run Club's an awesome thing to listen to. We are both psych grads, and given the topics that we might talk about today, that might get a little bit nerdy for some people, so apologies in advance. And obviously, we're both runners. I can't see how this could go wrong.
I can't either. Yeah, I'm very excited. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, it's good. Tell me about your most recent memorable run.
Oh, my most recent memorable, well, I'm just going to say the one from this morning because
Perfect.
it was fantastic. It was actually an all-time run. As you said, I'm in Sydney. I used to live in Sydney and I used to run around Centennial Park every single day. It is one of my favorite places to run in the whole world. This morning, not only did I get to run around, actually, this is such a good run. Not only did I get to run around Centennial Park, I decided to do a session with a friend, Sydney friend who I don't get to catch up with all the time. She met me, headed down into the park, did this session. I mean, it was a pretty lazy session because we just talked the entire time. But as you know, it's like the best way to catch up with someone. And then I'm currently staying in Airbnb in Bronte. And so I ran down, of course, to Bronte Baths and jumped in the water post-run and then just like sat in the sun for 10 minutes just being like, how good is this? What a great morning. The day can't go wrong from here.
I think any day that starts in Centennial Park is going to be a good day, right?
I agree with that. Yeah.
And then also, in fact, jumping into the pools, you have a little mantra about water and swimming, don't you?
I do. Well, yeah, always swim. And I mean, it's honestly not hard in Bronte because I genuinely think that is like one of the most beautiful places to swim in the world. But yeah, the premise behind always swim at a kind of really surface level, it means if you are near a swimmable body of water and you have the thought of swimming, you have to go for a swim. But really like the deeper sort of meaning behind it and that I sort of apply to my life is like know the things that are important to you in life and do them and sort of be disciplined about doing them. And so even though, I use it very literally all the time, but I think it kind of transcends more deeply to how I think about life. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we also have a similarity there as well. Then I have in Morse code, just go running tattooed on my wrist.
No way.
Which has a similar meaning. It's probably more about the don't overcomplicate things. Just go and do it.
Oh, I love that. No, I think always swim's the same. It's like,
Yeah.
if you know that you should be doing this thing and you know it's good for you, or you know it's important to you, whatever that is, I totally agree with that point of like, don't overcomplicate it. There you go. Not only all those other similarities you listed, we have a similar core value.
Look at that. Do you have it tattooed though? This might be the next step.
That's my next step in Morse code specifically.
Perfect. We could be tattoo buddies.
Yeah.
All right. Before we continue with all the really deep stuff, because we don't want to dive into that too quickly, tell me a little bit about your background and kind of, so for the listeners, you're currently the Chief Operating Officer at Startmate. And people who have listened before will know that we've had Michael Batko on, who's the CEO of Startmate, and good company, and there must be something about running at Startmate. But
Yeah.
how did we get there?
How do we get there? Well, I mean, very literally, the way that I got there is I did a program that Startmate runs called the Women Fellowship. And I did that because I wanted to get a job in a startup. And I'd been trying, I'd actually applied for a heap of jobs in startups and I hadn't gotten any of them. And then a friend told me about the Women Fellowship and I thought that sounds like exactly what I need to do. And then I joined that. And so the premise is there's like 100 in my cohort, 100 women, everyone sort of with the same goal of like go through and like land that kind of dream job. And it's amazing. You get like coaching and you get mentorship and you kind of learn about all the different roles. And so two of the things that I learned pretty quickly, one was that there was this thing called the chief of staff role, which I just had no idea what that had been previously, but I learned that that was a role that was really interesting to me and a skill set that I thought that I had. And then I also learned that there was this company called Startmate that was just like straight away, I was so bought in to what they were doing and how they were doing it. And not just through like the Women Fellowship, but through investing in startups really early on and investing in the startup ecosystem and this really like grassroots approach. So I sort of, like identified those two things pretty early on. And then fortunately, like 6 weeks later, Startmate went to market with the chief of staff role. And I just thought like, that's it. Like I'm getting this job. And so I got that job, a bit over 4 years ago. And then, as you say, I'm now COO, and that happened about 2 years ago and was sort of just like the next natural progression from chief of staff.
Why were you wanting to get into not that you actually ended up there because you ended up at
Yeah.
Startmate, but why were you wanting to get into a startup in the first place? What was it
Yeah.
about startups?
Prior to Startmate, I worked for a company called Elevate Education, which is basically it's not a startup, but I would say it has startup-esque qualities in that it was a very like young, high-performing team growing quickly. And I sort of started to get exposure to a few startups because we acquired some startups through in my time at Elevate. And so I literally just started like listening to podcasts and reading books and like learning more and more about this space, and everything I learned about it I got so much energy from. I just sort of it was quite magnetic to me. I became really interested. I really wanted to be a founder myself and still, would love to do that one day. It was sort of one of those things that when you just start getting more and more interested in it, almost like I just became so fascinated by this idea of like getting to work in this industry. And so like I remember in like 2018 listening to How I Built This, that classic startup podcast, Guy Raz, and listening to an episode with Mel Perkins from like, obviously Canva was already successful, but, compared to what it is today, and just being like so blown away by how ambitious she was. And it was so many little things like that that made me really interested in the industry. And even though, as you rightly say, Startmate, it's not a startup, but like we're so connected with startups that I feel like I'm like really deep in that. It ticks the box for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. I love something you said in there where like, one day I might want to be a founder, and completely just going past the fact that you've started a podcast that has grown into this epic community around running and getting people into running and just making running a more welcoming space for people. Tell me where the idea for Cheeky came from.
Yeah, for sure. And you're so right. I am founder of Cheeky Run Club. So Cheeky Run Club essentially started as a few different things that triggered the initial idea for it. And one was that I love listening to podcasts and I love listening to podcasts about running, but none of the podcasts about running that I was listening to were that interesting to me. Like they just not in a no, I mean they're interesting to a lot of people, obviously, but it wasn't talking about running in the way that I wanted to hear about it. So essentially a lot of the like really popular running podcasts were run by men and sort of talked about running as this really like really high performance sport, sort of looking at that like elites that, they're coming from like elite backgrounds. And whilst like I definitely am super interested in the high performance side, like that's just a small component or part of running to me. And so I sort of had this ongoing frustration of like, God, I'd love a good running podcast. And the other side to it was I felt that running had a little bit of an image problem where people thought that, and this was like 2 years ago now. It's honestly crazy how much this has already changed in the past 2 years. But running did have this reputation of being something that like was kind of hard and like not that fun. And like you had to be super serious and super into it. And like everyone just had this classic thing of like, I'm not a runner. Like there's a lot of like mindset issues about it. And so my friend Anna and I would talk about this on runs and kind of talk about how it felt like running needed a little bit of a rebrand. And then that's sort of what gave birth, if you will, to this idea of Cheeky Run Club. And it was one of those things, again, similar to like having the idea of working in startups. Like once we had the idea, I was like, God, I can't stop thinking about this. Like I think we've just got to do it. And you know, I mean, you know, like I'm interested to hear about like your experience starting with execs who run, but like it's obviously a lot of effort to bring it to life, but it's so rewarding to have something that like you have the idea and then actually go through the process and as I say, yeah, bring it to life.
Yeah, for sure. And I think your story is probably similar in the sense that I was like, well, even if no one listens to this, these are interesting conversations that I get to have about things that I'd have conversations about anyway. So
100%. Yeah.
yeah, just roll with it, right?
That's it. Yeah. And I do think it's got to start from something like that you're like, I would do this anyway. As you say, even if it never turned into anything, it's like, I mean, especially with Cheeky Run Club, because most of it's just literally Anna and I sitting down on the couch and talking about running, which we would do anyway. So it wasn't too hard to just like chuck some mics in front of us.
Yeah, it's perfect, isn't it? And how, like, you talk about that kind of transformation, I guess, in running over the 2 years that you've been doing it. And maybe you started the revolution or you just hit the timing perfectly.
Yeah.
But it's honestly insane, isn't
Yeah.
it? What running is seen as now compared to even probably COVID, where it was starting to become a thing that people went and did. They were like,
Yes.
I've got nothing else to do and I want to do some fitness, I'll do running. But I think, yeah, as you say, the last couple of years have been this explosion of a culture.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that, I mean, I guess as with startups, like it can be luck with timing. I just think like we couldn't have timed Cheeky better in terms of the momentum that is behind amateur running at the moment. And I agree, like, I feel like people often attribute it to COVID, and I do think a lot of people started running in COVID, but I honestly don't think it was till kind of 2022, 2023 that like the run club scene really took off.
Definitely.
And I feel like something that I've observed is there was that sort of first wave of people in COVID who tried running for the first time and realized they could do it. And they were sort of like the first iteration of people to go through that mindset shift of, I'm not a runner, I never run, I hate running, I can't run, to being like, oh, guys, I just did a half marathon. And it was almost like when they kind of graduated into that, like, oh, I run now and I love it and it's part of my routine and I'm forming run clubs, that it's like that they were like the first movers. And then that's when like everyone else came and it sort of snowballed in the last few years. And I genuinely think the power of seeing other people who have never considered themselves runners get into running has just made so many people look at themselves and be like, well, why couldn't I do that? Which is just, which is amazing.
And some interesting data, I don't know if you've ever looked at the Ozplay data, but it's like a government agency around sport and they collect heaps of information, super interesting. So this is me getting nerdy already, but they get some just sentiment around why people run and people saying or mentioning things about the social aspect of running. The sentiment around that has basically doubled pre-COVID to the most recent data, which was 2023 or 24. Yeah, so heaps more people are doing it for social reasons.
I love that. That is so interesting. Oh, I'd love to have a look at that data. I did not realize that was something people cared to collect.
It's an incredible data set. We can nerd about that later. I'll send that through.
No, I do feel like there was a point in time where a lot of people who weren't like doing it for the in performance side of it, a lot of people ran to lose weight. And that was sort of like the brand for a while. And it's so cool to see all these other amazing motivations come through because as you and I know, like you get so much more out of running. I mean, there's so many other reasons why people would run.
Yeah.
And so, it's an exciting time to be involved in running.
It is. And actually, I was listening to one of your podcasts the other day and I have to disagree with one of your statements. And it was quite funny listening to it because it was basically 3 people who were definitely part of the cult saying that running is not a cult.
Oh, we
So
got so much feedback on that episode from being like, guys, that was a tough listen. So, for listeners, I did an episode with Anna, my co host, and then our friend Izzy trying to answer the question of like, is running a cult? And we were all sort of trying to argue that like maybe it was a little bit culty, but like we personally weren't in the cult. And I was definitely doing that. And then, yeah, a lot of feedback afterwards of like, that was so tone deaf. You're all in the running cult. But I reckon you'd be in the running cult too, Jace.
I'm yeah, but see, I know I'm in the running cult.
Yeah,
I'm not denying
that's
it.
good.
I'm in the cult, and Kipchoge is quite squarely our leader,
He's the
right?
cult
We just
leader.
see he is
Yeah.
the cult leader. He
Yeah,
is now
that's
coming
fair.
to Sydney to lead us astray. Yeah. I want to hear about your running, and the thing that I find most interesting about people's running stories is the kind of running origin story. Why did you start running, or where did the running come from for you?
Yeah, the classic, the running origin story. Well, I mean, I feel like mine's maybe not that interesting, which is just like I feel like I always loved running. Like
Mm.
I loved cross country in high school. I loved athletics. I mean, I loved team sport more. Like that was always my preference was team sport. And so I did running training for like a lot of high school, but I didn't mind it, but I didn't love it the same way I loved team sports. But I would love like always the process of like going for a run was, I mean, all the way through high school, something that I did, but it wasn't like yeah, I mean, as we've discussed, like the culture around running was just so different. Like it was not a cool thing to go for a run. And when I started at uni, like I moved to college. So I sort of moved out of home, moved to college, and I was in this new environment. And I running was one of the things that I just like kept throughout that time period. And like I didn't know that many people like running in college. I would always just be running by myself. And I wasn't running, I'd just run like a couple times a week, but it was just this like thing that I would do to like get out of college and like I would like run this loop. And it was at that point in time, it was this thing that was like, it was just like my space. And I just did it, like, it just made me feel good. And it was like
Mm.
very, very pure in that sense, like nothing more than that. I know that it's so funny. It feels so funny reminiscing, but like, I didn't have a smartwatch. Like, I didn't have any of those things. Like, I would have had no idea how long that loop was, but I would still like, I'd have a few different loops and I'd know what my PB was on those loops. And every now and then I'd like get out and try and like get a loop PB. And at that time as well, I actually did a few marathons, which was super. Again, marathons was not a thing back then. Like
Mm.
I didn't really know anyone doing marathons, but it was just this like I just loved the challenge of it, and I thought like, what a cool thing to do, like force myself to train and looking back, like it was such bad training. I didn't have a coach. I knew nothing. I didn't know anyone who did it. I knew nothing about doing it. Like my training would have been terrible. And as a result, the marathons were slow and very, very hard. But I was just like so proud of myself for doing it
Mm.
and I loved to do it. And I almost feel like so that was my like history, I guess, in terms of the origin story. But then I feel like there's almost another origin story, which is when I got a
When did it
coach.
change? Yeah.
Yeah. Which is when I got a coach, like, which is crazy. I was playing soccer. I was living in Sydney. I was playing soccer, and one of the girls I played soccer with was running, like, what to me seemed like just insane amounts. And I was like, how are you doing this? How are you not getting injured? Because for me, whenever I'd run more than a few times a week, I would just get injured. And so I'd kind of capped myself out. And then she was like, you should come along. I'm running with Run Crew, which is a running group in Sydney. And I started training with Run Crew, and just getting a coach and training to a program changed running from it almost just like supercharged how much I could run, which is like
Mm.
all of a sudden it's something if you're pacing your week right, like you can do it every day and you can kind of like push. And that's when I started like doing fun runs and like caring about times for things and running with clubs and so on. And so it really just brought me into this whole other element of all these other like dimensions of running, which is sort of more where I am today.
Yeah. It's a really interesting, I guess, reflection, and your journey is a great one because it shows probably some stuff that we're going to talk about soon, actually. But you can just go and do it and enjoy it, and it can be something that you do. But there's also this like whole world that
Yeah.
you just never unlock until some other inflection point happens.
Mm.
For you, it was getting a coach, and it also shows this kind of like oh, like this running thing's not that hard when you start to have some more kind of infrastructure around it and
Totally.
understanding of it, and which I guess is kind of what Cheeky is there to do as well, right?
Yeah,
Like you're
big
trying to
time.
set up that infrastructure to make it not a scary thing and people to get into, but it's yeah, I've reflected with a few people just kind of going like, running eventually just becomes easy, but you just got to do it
Yeah,
a fair
yeah.
bit to start with,
Oh,
right?
I completely agree. Although, like, does it become it becomes much easier, but still, like, I don't reckon there's a day goes by where there's not like one point in my run where I'm like,
Oh
God,
yeah.
this is hard. I'm ready for it to be done. Like, it doesn't, and I don't want it to ever be like easy the whole time. That's not the goal
Mm,
either. But definitely, I know, and the points are always when I'm like coming back from injury and I haven't run for a few months, and I'm like, oh my God, why would anyone ever get into running? Because it's so hard to get past those initial hurdles, to get to a stage where you're actually enjoying it. You're getting that positive reinforcement of improving and feeling like you're getting better.
mm.
It's not just like unpleasant the whole time.
Yeah, I think that quite well sets up where we might go here. So we're going to do something a bit different. This is a execs who run first. So thank you very much for being my guinea pig. But essentially, I asked you before we recorded to let me know a topic that you're passionate about and could just talk all day about related to running or adjacent to running. And the thing you came up with, which I was actually quite interested in as well, because I could probably talk about this all day as well. Well, it's kind of two things, but it's really running as a form of, or how it relates to discipline and to self confidence,
Mm.
which I think will be something that resonates quite well because particularly the whole vibe of this podcast in terms of kind of that intersection between running and leadership, I think those things just like they cross over so well. Like discipline and self confidence are so needed in leadership as
Yeah,
well as in running. So what I kind of want to start with is actually going back to your always swim rule
yeah.
because it's kind of a trigger for some of that discipline piece. So why did you start doing that in the first place?
God, that's a great question. Oh, you know what? It started so I grew up on the Gold Coast, which obviously are blessed with great swimming options. And yeah, swimming in the ocean, as for a lot of people, is like essentially a spiritual experience to me. Like I love just jumping in the ocean. And then I moved to Brisbane for uni. And I felt one of the things I struggled with was like just literally not having access to like the ocean at a moment's
Mm,
notice, not being able to dive in. And like I really realized how like just purely like joyful that experience is. And I've you can jump in the pool and that's actually still really nice. So I sort of could get around it a little bit, but that like it literally started at like the most superficial level of like find opportunities to go for swims. And it's sort of just like throughout my 20s evolved to have this whole deeper meaning. I remember doing an exercise like early on in my career of like identifying your values, and I came up with a lot about like, like authenticity and like joy and challenge, and like nothing really captured what I felt like was this essence of what was important to me. And then it somehow came to me that this like joking motto that I had of always swim actually like symbolized so much more than just that in terms of like my philosophy on life and my belief that like so much of like what holds us back from happiness sometimes is just like ourselves getting our own way and like overcomplicating things and making it too hard. And like
mm,
this is oversimplifying things. It can be that easy of just like choose to do the things that are going to be good for you. And it's I can't tell you how like there are genuinely big ways that that's impacted my life. Like even from it's like social media. It's just like that is something that for like of course I had Instagram like everyone else. And then but just like looking at myself and my life and being like, is that where I want to is that where I want time to go? Even if it was just 15 minutes a day, like do I look at that and am I like, yes, I'm happy with how that time is spent? And so I feel like it's sort of it's now this thing of being like being really honest with yourself about like, are you doing the things that you should be doing? I don't know if that makes sense.
yeah, no, it does.
Mm.
How do you keep that discipline? Like, how do you ensure that you're really staying true to that kind of mantra?
Yeah, well, honestly, I feel like a big part of it, it's easier for me to, in the context of stepping back and having a look at my life and how I'm spending my time. And I have a whole bunch of like little rituals that I do, even from like deciding on like a word of the year at the start of the year. And like that's such a, everyone does that. It's like a fun process, but like it's also a genuine reflection point for me to be like, where's my time going? Where do I want it to be spent? And then for me, like being a lot more intentional about it than just having like the word of the year is like, okay, well, what are the systems and habits that I'm developing in my life that will like help me like live in a way that's true to that. And I feel like to come back to discipline, like I mentioned before that I was on another podcast a couple of weeks ago, and she asked me like, how do you stay disciplined? And this is before I'd responded, she saying I want to talk about discipline, because I was like, God, I don't feel like I have to be very disciplined in my life, but I feel like that's because I've done a good job at setting up systems that I can sort of just work within. And something like running, like you'd think that you'd need to be really disciplined to do it every day, but I'm sure you're the same. Like it doesn't feel like discipline to get up and go for a run, because I've
No.
like, yeah, like, well, because I love it, but also because like you build the structures around it, you get the program, you run with friends, like you have a goal, like you do all those things, and it makes it feel easy, not hard. So I don't know,
Yeah.
interested in your thoughts on this, but like I don't know how much discipline is like forcing yourself to do hard things, or figuring out what the important things are and then figuring out how you make it easy to do them.
I think discipline very quickly becomes not discipline, because discipline is habits, right?
Mm.
So once you start doing something, you need some sense of, yeah, I don't know if discipline is the word, but you need
Yeah.
something in you to be like, I want to start doing this and I want to do it consistently and continually to the point that it's now a habit. And so whatever that discipline in quote marks was to get me to do it in the first place has now formed a habit, and now I just go and do it and it's easy,
Yeah.
right?
I feel like the discipline comes in at like the honest conversation with yourself about,
Mm,
and again, this could be at work or in running, but about like, oh, am I happy with this?
yeah,
Like, am I happy with how I'm
yeah,
showing up here, or whatever that is? And like honest, and the discipline to like make that change. And I also want to be clear, like there are so many parts of my life that I could do this a million times better. Like I feel like the running part is visible, and as I say, like I've made it feel easy, so like that might look disciplined. I feel like there are a lot of areas of my life where I'm truly, truly not disciplined.
yeah.
But to come back to the self-confidence piece, I do think that building discipline in one area does give you confidence to know that you can then do that in other areas as well. So it's sort of like compounding in that sense.
Yeah, it's a reflection I've had in the last few years as well, going, these are things that I've been doing for the best part of 10 years now as a relatively competitive athlete, and it got me to this point, and I had to have these things to do this, but I've not always translated into other areas of my life. And
Yeah.
trying to go, why is that the case? And I think it just comes back to that habit formation, right? I've not gone through this motion of putting these habits in place in other areas of my life
Yeah.
to then be like, oh, okay, now it's really easy why I do these things all the time because I've always done it. Whereas if
Totally.
I've been running, I don't know, or exercising at least 5 or 6 times a week for the last 10 years now, probably, right?
Yeah.
It's very easy just to go out and do something
Yeah.
because it's just
Yeah.
part of what I do.
What's another area of your life that you're like, I need to bring the same like rigor to that you're not at the moment?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I think probably lots of areas to be brutally honest. But
Mm.
I probably thought about it from a work context mostly, but it even comes into like the podcast where,
Mm.
and I'm probably developing more by doing the podcast because you've got this a bit like running. Running, you particularly if you're racing, you build up these kind of habits to be able to enable you to do a certain event that is time bound, right? Like,
Yeah.
when people set goals, having something that's time bound is super useful. And so starting to apply that same principle to something like a podcast where you're like, all right, if I want to be getting an episode out every 2 weeks, then I have to figure out how to work back from there to ensure that I've got the guests and I've recorded the episodes and I've edited and I've got the time to do that. And so it starts to actually build in this kind of habitual
Yes.
routine. And, discipline forced me to kind of do it in
You
the
need the
first place, or
forcing
got me to do it in the
function.
first place. But
Yeah.
now it's just kind of like, all right, I know what this looks like. I know what I can enable. And I think it's really that habit piece is the
Yes.
important part. But is it discipline that starts that? Is discipline that kind of
Yeah.
is the Kickstarter?
I think the other thing that comes into it is like, and we've touched on this briefly, but having that really strong why for why you want to be doing something anyway. And we spoke about that a little bit with running. Like, so good to have that really clear idea of what is it that you want to get out of it and why it is that you want to do it. But I feel like this, and I've fallen into this trap for sure, but there are times when you can sort of commit to doing something because for a reason that may be more superficial, or you feel like you should do it, or some kind of ego driven reason. And then I feel like that ends up requiring way more discipline because you have to sort of like every day, like convince yourself to do it.
Yeah,
Whereas if it is something that you're doing because you've got a really strong motivation to do it, then it's the motivation that pushes you to do it rather than the discipline, like you having to force yourself to
yeah.
do that thing.
And I think motivation's a really key piece. Early on in my career, and I did it through high school, and I wanted to join the Defence Force, right? So I did
Oh,
cadets all
interesting.
through
Yeah.
school and was a reservist during university. And obviously people think about the military as this highly disciplined
Yeah,
environment, and it's highly disciplined for a
absolutely.
lot of reasons. But I think the piece that you struck there is motivation is the difference. So
Mm.
discipline, regardless of the situation, is the formation of habits, right? In the military, it's you get up at 05:45 every morning and you make your
Yeah.
bed, and there's all this stuff that you start to do and you do every day, and it can still be a bit draining, but it starts to become the thing that you do. Now, you probably weren't particularly motivated to do that, but you had a whole bunch of other people that were making you really motivated to do that because they
Yeah.
were yelling at you
Yeah.
if you weren't, right? So you didn't have any motivation, but you had this kind of external motivator
Yeah.
that got you to do it. Whereas things that we form by ourselves, we have this intrinsic motivation to start doing it
Yes.
that then creates the habit that is then what we call the discipline.
Yeah, totally. And I feel like maybe with running, it can, because it's a high barrier to start in the sense that it's hard when you start,
Mm.
like you sort of need quite a strong extrinsic or intrinsic force there, either like a friend
Yeah.
like forcing you along or a run club or whatever, or like, yeah,
Yeah.
that real drive internally.
Yeah. Or even like you mentioned earlier, like losing weight. It's a pretty strong
True.
motivator to be like,
Yep.
all right, I need to start building this habit to try and lose weight.
Yep.
This is the
Yeah.
thing that's going
Yeah.
to do it, and this is what I need to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, it's interesting. I want to dive into the self-confidence piece a
Mm.
little bit more because I probably haven't thought about that one as much. And I think it's interesting, and I was doing some kind of research on it beforehand. But what to you about running or having incorporated running in your life helps enable that level of self-confidence for you?
Mm. Maybe I'll start. Actually feel like the where my mind went is not about me per se, but we did a poll recently with our listeners on like why are you doing marathon? Like why are you training for your next marathon? Because, as you said, it's become this massive trend recently. And we sort of wanted to understand what was driving people. And like easily the number one answer is like I want to prove to myself that I can do hard things. And I feel like there's a few things that come into that. One is that like the more frictionless our society becomes, the more like easily we can,
Mm.
get things and access things, and there's food at our door and there's XYZ. Like I think that we can feel like a sense of like needing to have to work for something. And then like so I feel like that's part of like I actually just I want to push myself and prove that I can do this. Then the other thing is like running's really interesting because it's such a proxy for life in so many ways. But in this instance, it's sort of like if you can prove in this controlled environment that you can do something, then that can give you confidence that you can do other hard things. So I feel like it's not like I'm like, oh, sitting in a tough conversation and I'm like, oh, I can have this tough conversation because I did a marathon. Like, it's not that literal. It's more like you proved yourself that you can like show up every day and like every single day when my alarm goes off. I almost always am like, I don't really want to get out of bed right now. Even though I know we spoke about how like we love running and we want to do it. And I always do it. But there is always a part of my brain that goes like, oh, this feels like it's going to be hard and maybe it's raining and I'm kind of tired right now or whatever it is. And it's almost like the practice of proving to yourself, proving to that little voice like, oh no, I can do those things. Even if I have that little bit of doubt in my mind that I can, or like that part of my brain that's not believing that I can, like actually being able to prove to yourself like that part of your brain is sort of just like this meaningless
Mm.
voice. Like you can decide, you have that agency to decide what you can do. So I feel like, yeah, whilst it sort of came through in that, like, why do you do a marathon? And I'm sure the activity of completing the marathon would build that in people. I actually think it's like the daily habit of it. Is that making sense? Like the daily, like conquering that voice. Do you get that
Yeah,
voice? I don't know.
to some extent. I want to
No.
unpack a little bit of what you said because I think it
Yeah.
was interesting and interesting thinking about the conversations I have with people on this podcast versus your audience base, quite different groups.
Yeah.
And I find it interesting that your group still came out and said doing hard things because the thing I get on this podcast, and not everybody I've had on is a super serious
Mm.
runner. Like Becco's a great example, right? Like he probably wouldn't really consider himself a runner, right? He runs three
Yeah.
times a week. It's super important to him. It's a big part of his life, but he doesn't really think about himself as a runner too much. Others I've had on, and a lot of it is this challenge. They like the
Yeah.
challenge and they go and do ultra races or they do whatever it is. And it's this, talking to executive leaders, I think this kind of like high performance nature of them. They'll go and do a hard thing somewhere else because it's similar to doing a hard thing
Mm.
in a work environment. So to that angle of building up some of that, maybe it is building up some of that self-confidence around, I've done hard things here, I can do hard things
Mm.
here, maybe makes sense. But to your other point, I think also they both overlap where, well, really both things were done based on forming strong habits through discipline.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think both kind of play into just creating an individual who now has a better sense of self because of
Yes.
both of those things.
Yeah. I completely agree. Like they both sort of converge at that same area, no matter how you
Yeah.
kind of get there.
And I think it intertwines in with resilience as well, which is something I've thought about a lot of it over the last few years, really going about like resilience is derived through doing those hard things.
Yeah.
And once you've done it, that then gives you that sense of confidence that you can do it in other situations as well.
Oh, 100%.
Mm.
I feel like running in resilience, and I can't remember if this was even one of the topics I suggested we could talk about because I totally agree. I feel like there's such a strong positive correlation between the two. Part of it is definitely that, like, yeah, consistently putting yourself through hard things and like feeling like, you can get through them and they're not that hard. And then there's also something to do with like everyday resilience in that, like, running as a stress management tool. I'm sure that so many people would say one of the main reasons they run is just because it makes them feel so good that day.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
I feel like in terms of building resilience, like it's a meta version of that is like it kind of makes you realize that nothing is that bad. Not nothing is that bad. Some things are really bad, but like running can put everything into perspective and it has such
Mm.
a powerful ability to turn a day around, turn a problem around, make things feel manageable. For me, like a run, I just feel so like strong after I've been through. Like I feel like I could do anything, and like that, it gives. I don't know what it does in your brain to make you do that, but like yeah, and more so after tough runs as well. Like you could just finish feeling like, you know what, I could pretty much like do whatever right now, and
Mm.
so it's kind of interesting because as you say, it's like on the one level, it's helping you realize you can get through hard things. But on the other level, it's just like this benefit of like how good it makes you feel and how it helps you manage stress and put those hard things into perspective.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask about, so we talked before about your transition from being someone who goes running, maybe to becoming a runner, getting a
Yeah.
coach and joining a group and all that kind of stuff. Did you, or if you reflect on it, did you see a kind of change from that perspective where you're now going and you're actually putting yourself in the situation where you're doing harder things, right? Because you're going and
Yeah.
doing workouts and your coaches got you doing all this kind of stuff. Did you notice that change in terms of your mindset and your temperament around some of these things?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. I think so. Yeah, I definitely think so. I feel like on one level, it was such a lesson for me that I had quite like a fixed mindset in what I thought my running abilities were. And in that, the lesson there is essentially like you can do so much more than what you're capable of, which sounds really cliche, but like again, running as a proxy for life, like running teaches you that. Like my marathon PB before Run Crew was like 4 hours and 15 minutes or something like that, which as I said, I was stoked with. And then I had this like I remember talking to Gary, my coach, when I first started and setting goals through that and having this like goal of, well, what if I could run a sub 3 hour marathon, which was just like so far beyond what I thought I could do. And Gary being like, yeah, like you'll be able to do that, whatever. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. Anyway, and then like trained and then I did it. And I was like, oh, that actually wasn't that hard. And well, not that it wasn't that hard. Again, training was hard, but it was more like, oh, why did I create this narrative in my head that like that was so far beyond my abilities? And so there is like, I do think you can get these breakthroughs in running where you realize how much your beliefs are holding you back and that you just have these ideas that you've formed over time or because of what you've been told in society or because of your previous performance. But actually, if you like can change what you're doing, you can change the outcome. Like shocking. But running again is such a clear way to learn that lesson. And I think that so many people, when they run consistently to a program, achieve so far beyond what they thought they were capable of doing. And like, what a great lesson to learn as an adult. Like, there aren't that many times as an adult where we're like, hey, we're going to fully change our approach to this one thing in life and be able to see, because running, so we have metrics associated with everything and we can track it all, be able to see, oh, me changing my behavior changes an outcome. And I just think that, again, we spoke about agency a little bit before, but what a great lesson. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah.
No, it does. I want to ask though, what do you think it is that is fundamentally about you that puts you in a position where you're getting asked your goals and you're like, yeah, I'm going to take an hour and 20 minutes off my marathon time. Like that's probably not a normal situation, right? Not many people, when they go into a structured run and go, yeah, I could definitely take an hour off my marathon. They go like, oh, I could take 15 minutes or maybe half an hour. But like,
it was literally like, I think I did like an hour and 15-minute PB. It was like the best PB ever. I'll never get a PB like that again. What is it about me? Well, I don't think this is going to be a very good answer. I feel like I have quite high self-esteem. I feel like I have a very high opinion of and I really hope that doesn't come off in an arrogant or like, I don't know if it's that cool to say things like that. I just feel like I have quite a high opinion
let's
of
say
like,
it.
yeah,
No tall poppies, no tall poppy
okay,
chopping around here.
yeah. I don't know. I feel like I have a high opinion of what I can do if I try. Kind of feel like I could do whatever if I like tried to do it. And again, like maybe running teaches you that, like, and having, you know, run previous to that, like maybe I had an inkling of that. But I feel like in life and in work it's the same. Like I don't get scared off by big challenges. I get like really interested by them. And
Yep.
even if I actually can't do them in the end, even if it turns out that I couldn't figure it out, like I have this like really strong belief that like I probably can figure it out or do something that's good. And I'm not that probably the like flip side to that is like I'm not that worried about not being able to do it in a sense. And
Yeah.
probably less that 3 hour goal, although that definitely was something that I just sort of threw out there. But in work and in even with cheeky, I guess. But yeah, I'm not like, oh, I will only do this if I'm going to be really good at it. I'm kind of like, cool, I'm happy to just be okay at it. But like, I think I'll probably figure something out and that'll be a better outcome than not doing it all in the first place.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I like that too. I like that because there's a quote that I really like. And I think I like it because it's something that I've liked it for a long time, but something that I constantly need to
Yeah.
remind myself because I wouldn't say I'm a perfectionist, but there are certainly elements of wanting to be planned around something before doing it.
Yeah.
And the quote is, you don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great.
Oh, yeah, I
And
love that.
yeah, and I think it's exactly that, right?
Yeah.
You've just got to get out there and do it and see how it goes because you never know where you might end up and you never know how that kind of hard thing maybe becomes less hard eventually,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff until you go and do it.
Like, and what if it works? Like, what if
Yeah.
it does work? And also, like, what if it doesn't? Like, it's all good. I don't know. It's probably
Some
not that
learning,
bad.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
Like as you were talking, I was reflecting on one of those like running related ones where, God, probably 3 years, 4 years into being a runner. And there was a guy, I was living in Christchurch back in New Zealand at the time. And I guess one of my running idols, I say at the time, but still now, and has a big big influence on my running, Oscar Baines, and we had the same coach, and he was kind of the guy. I
Yeah.
think he won the Auckland Marathon that year.
Okay.
But I remember just like running around Hagley Park, which is, I guess, Christchurch's equivalent
Centennial,
of
okay.
Centennial Park. It's not quite the same, but it's a famous place for runners in Christchurch. And just looking at the times he was running these like interval sessions at and going, holy shit, I'm never going to be able to do something like that, right?
Yeah.
I just ran a marathon at that pace
Wow.
2 months ago, right? And
How
it's like,
good.
it's ridiculous how you put yourself in that position where you go, oh, that's awesome. I'd love to be able to do that, but that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And then it does.
It does. And I also think there's something there about having those like running idols in a sense. And maybe they are people who you train with or who, train by the same coach or whatever that looks like. Like in terms of building your own sense of like what you can do. Like something that's been so helpful for me is like I run with so many women who are such incredible runners, but who are just amateur runners. But they do a race that I'm like, oh my God, how did they do that time? That's so impressive. I never could do that time. But then I'm like, okay, but if I just change my training or train a little bit more or whatever it is, and then you kind of end up getting there. And I feel like it just helps make everything feel so much more believable and accessible if you see someone else doing it that sort of paves the way. And you're like, oh, okay, this party that's like maybe like, oh, okay, maybe I find that very inspiring. Yeah.
Yeah, I think having those little things to aspire to is super useful. I reflect on it as well, and a lot of the running idols that I've had, they've been good runners. They've not necessarily been like incredible runners, but I think something that they've all had in common is the passion and the dedication they've had to the sport.
Yeah.
Sam Hopper is probably
Oh,
someone
yeah. Yeah, I know Sam.
you're aware of. So I lived with Sam in my third year of university, and I was a relatively new runner at that time, and Sam had run all through school, and
Yeah.
he's just, anyone who knows Sam Hopper
Yeah.
knows he is the biggest frother around running that probably
Yeah.
exists, right?
Lives and breathes
Like,
it.
he is Mr. Running.
Mm.
And like, he was a great runner at the time and far better than me. And that was such a like, this is awesome. Like, this guy just loves doing this thing.
Totally. And people like that, I have a friend like that, Leash, and she just like, she's the one who got me into Run Crew in the first place. And she just has this like speaking of running frothers, she's Hopper level, if not even exceeding Hopper. And she just has this ability to like, she's like a vortex and she just pulls people in because she lives and breathes it. And you see how much joy it gives her. And you're kind of like, hey, that looks sort of fun. And those people are sort of like these channels into running.
I want to ask, in this crossover between running and your career, have there been points in which you've been like, man, if I wasn't running, there's no way I could have done this from a career point of view, like it being the kind of driver and supporter of you throughout that journey?
Oh, absolutely. And I would say not necessarily in like a healthy way either. I reckon one of the most stressful part of my career was when I was working at my previous company, Elevate, and it was during COVID. And because we were an education business, we work with schools were all closing down. It was a really stressful time for the business and globally. And it was like a lot of hopes were being pinned on the Australian business, which was like the biggest and most secure and which I was responsible for. And we also had hundreds of people who their jobs was going into schools and doing this thing that they could no longer get money. And we sort of obviously had to go through the whole JobKeeper process and try and basically find a way to like support them as well. And for a lot of reasons, that meant that like I felt so much on my shoulders. Plus the context of COVID, like the existential threat of it all. But then also like I'd always gone into the office every day and all of a sudden I was at home and I like the barriers between work and life just became like non-existent. And my bosses were in New York and London and I was just like on calls all hours of the day. Like it was genuinely a time that like it was quite stressful. And at that time, it was almost like the more I ran, the more I could deal with. And so like running just became this way that I could like, okay, well, I can control this. And like I can just put so much into it. And it gives back. Like it was giving me so much energy. And I would run like 2 hours before work in the morning just to like get out some of my stress and energy. And then it would give me this feeling of like, well, I ran 26 Ks before work. So like, oh, I'm all good. I can do anything. But like, I don't know that that was necessarily like a super sustainable approach to like stress management per se. But it's funny, like, I also I'm not like very hard on myself about that. I'm kind of like, I get it. It was a coping mechanism and it genuinely did make that time still kind of enjoyable despite all that, because I was loving everything I was getting from running. And it did give me this sense of like, again, like what I could control. I think where it sort of fell apart was like actually like after COVID, and I changed jobs, and well, I kind of still during COVID, but I changed jobs and I started working at Startmate, which had a much better work-life balance. Like COVID, everything like opened up again, and I all of a sudden had like a social life again, and I moved cities to Melbourne. And then I was still trying to do this like crazy high mileage that I was doing alongside this new job and new friends and new city. And that's when like my body just like couldn't hack it anymore, and I started getting injuries. Whereas COVID, it felt like all I cared about was like work and running, and I could just like go for it. And you have so much like downtime and recovery. But there's no way I could have gotten through that without running as much. There's just no way. I mean, other people maybe would have better stress, like different stress management mechanisms. But for me, like running is the best way to manage my stress. And like, I think I'm like not that stressed generally because of it. But yeah, I reckon that was a good example.
On that, how do you manage that, particularly when you're doing like running where you're training for something, right? And you're putting intensity into it and all this kind of stuff. And obviously the body is terrible at, or it doesn't know the difference between the physical stress you're putting it through running and
Yeah,
emotional stress you might be having at or work
totally.
stress or whatever it is. How have you managed that kind of factor that maybe wasn't apparent at that time?
Yeah. It's funny because I feel like if you asked my family or some of my friends, they would be like, she doesn't manage it very well. Because I still feel like I definitely haven't got that balance right, although better. I feel like I've now sort of got the mindset when it comes to running, which I think is good for me, of earn the right to do more. So for me, because I know that I have a very busy work life and podcast life and social life, and all those things are super important to me, as important as running is, I can't just run as much as I want, because then I'll get sick, I'll get injured. Well, I probably can get sick anyway, but I get injured and then I can't run, and like that's worst case scenario. And so I kind of have this agreement with myself at the moment where I'm like, until I make more space in my life through whatever that looks like, I'm not really going to increase my running, even though I would like love to just be running more and adding intensity and everything. And so at the moment I'm training for a marathon, and with that I have this philosophy of earn the right to do more. I actually am not running that much more during the week than I was when training for half marathons, because I genuinely don't think that, to be realistic with myself and honest with myself, I don't think that there's a lot of give in my week. And I've had too many marathon blocks in the past that I've either like completely got burnt out or gotten injured. And so I'm sort of going, okay, weekends I'll increase my long runs, and my long runs have been getting long, but like during the week, like if I sleep really well one week, like I find more time for sleep or whatever it is, then I'll push a bit harder, I'll do a bit more. But other weeks, like I always have to like give myself permission to actually do the extras that I want when it comes to running, which isn't like maybe that fun of an answer. But I think for the way that my mind works, that like earn the right to do more kind of is a good accountability for me.
What's it taken you to get to that point? Because I think it's quite a useful piece. I think the next piece that we're already seeing it with races being sold out, but
Yeah.
I think as people get into running and they enjoy it and the social element, it probably naturally there'll be a cohort that go, all right, I like this challenging piece for doing more of it and
Yeah, yeah,
building
yeah.
out into the part that it now becomes less of like a nice, easy, healthy fitness thing to do and a social element
Yeah.
to now a genuine part of my life that I do have to balance because this is a stressful thing that I'm doing to myself. So what was it that I guess got you to the point of going, oh, right, this is what's going on and I have to figure out how to make this all fit
Yeah.
in?
It's a good question. Like to be honest, I would say it like I was hit in the head by it enough times that I couldn't
Mm.
like ignore it anymore. I'd
Yep.
love to say that I like realized it of my own accord, but it was more like it was like screaming at me. So I was training for Berlin Marathon last year, and it was the year we'd launched Cheeky, and I was working incredibly hard on it. And I was working incredibly hard at work, and I was working really hard at work, and I had like the worst training block I've ever had in my life. I got like sick quite a few times right at the beginning, and I just couldn't get out of it. And my running just got worse and worse and worse, to the extent that my easy runs, my heart rate was like through the roof. Like everything felt like it was like I would get this crazy lactic through my body 10 minutes into the run. And it was such an awful experience. And we spoke before about how running can be confidence building like this. Like I lost a lot of confidence because I was like, what's happening? This is something that my body has always been able to do, and I can't do it anymore. And every run I'd go out being like, how's it going to feel? How's it going to feel? And it, it didn't feel any better. And so I had to have this real reckoning with myself of like, this isn't, like, it was because it was taken away from me. And like, I did the marathon, but I didn't do well in it. And most of the training block was honestly awful. Like it was so hard. It was so unenjoyable. And it turns out I found out a few months later that I was anemic, and I was so iron deficient. And so of course that was like massively playing into that. And I will say getting an iron fusion was like life changing for me in terms of my running. But before I found out that, I had to reckon with like, okay, well, you're not getting anywhere near enough sleep, and you're not fueling very well at all. And, all these, your recovery is shocking. You're getting zero recovery time in. So like running does not exist in a vacuum. Like you can't just like more of it. It's like, what else is happening in your life? And I had to have a like good hard look in the mirror with myself, have one of those really honest conversations with myself that we spoke about earlier. I was like, what do you think is happening here? Like, of course you feel shit. Like you can't expect that you can run 100 plus Ks a week and do all these other things. Like some people can, like I'm just not built that way. And it's still a lesson that I need to like force myself to come back to all the time. Because of course you have blocks where you just like, you're feeling great, and it just becomes tempting to like forget all of that. But that really taught me that like, I'm human. Like my body has limits. It'll like, you can't actually always like force your way through those things with like a good attitude. So I don't know. I hope that other people starting out on their running journeys, she mentioned before, which I totally agree. I think that's going to be a trend that we see. I hope that the culture can shift, and like there can be more awareness around things like recovery and sleep and nutrition, and like how important all those things are. But I reckon for a lot of people, like it's just something you need to learn yourself, and anyone can tell you.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I want to get into the final little segment that we have, and we've touched on a little bit of this throughout the conversation as well, to be honest, but I get it from everybody, and it's 3 pieces of advice. So it's your top piece of advice for life, your top piece of advice for leadership, and of course, your top piece of advice for running.
Okay, life, leadership, running. Top piece of advice. Wow.
This is the hardest question you'll get all day.
Yeah. Top piece of advice for life. Okay, I feel like there's something about like not taking yourself too seriously. And there's that to come back to me by studying psychology. I don't know if you remember learning about like the spotlight effect, where like people can feel like there's a spotlight on them at all times and everyone's paying attention. But I think that there's a lot of value in like not in recognizing that that's like a fault in the way that our brain, the schemas that our brain's using, and like not taking yourself that seriously, whether that's like at work. Like I feel like so many things are really stressful. So many things are stressful when you're taking like yourself and all of it too seriously, and like stepping back from that and recognizing what it is helps. And same with running, like not taking it too seriously, like it should be a fun thing. So, I mean, that's coming from someone who's started a running podcast, so obviously takes their running pretty bloody seriously. But yeah, like
Who is also in a running cult.
yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I think I find it helpful in life to sometimes be like don't take yourself that seriously.
Yep. No, I love it.
Okay, wait, what was the
Leadership.
next one? Leadership. I mean, I don't think I have anything original here. I feel like all my best leadership advice are like stolen from books. And so this is a cliche one, but Radical Candor by Kim Scott My Life when
Great
it
book.
came to being a
Yep.
manager. And I do think, funnily enough, not a dissimilar vein from my life advice, but I love the framing of like, stop making things about yourself. Like when you're giving feedback and finding it uncomfortable, having that uncomfortable conversation, like you're generally worried about yourself and how you're being perceived
Mm.
and how you are making the other person feel and like how that might again be reflecting back on you. And I have found it so useful in leadership to stop making like recognize when I'm making it about myself and protecting my own feelings and then reframe it as like what's the best outcome for the company right now. And if that is like being as like clear as possible about that particular feedback or making that really hard decision that will upset someone because like long term. I feel like our like emotions can impact our ability to make those good decisions and have those hard conversations. And it's not about not having those emotions. Like that is not possible. Everyone has emotions. It's about recognizing them and the impact they're having on your decision making and like understanding the interplay there. And so I guess the advice would be like, making it less about yourself.
Yep, that's good. And then the most important one.
Running.
What's your running advice?
Oh, okay. I'm trying to think about running advice that would be useful for your specific audience because I'm guessing people who listen to this podcast already run a lot. Is that true?
Not necessarily, but yeah, I think there's a bit like the guests that have come on. I think there's a range, right? So there's people who run ultra marathons, and then there's people who run 3 times a week because it's good for their physical and mental
Totally.
well-being.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then maybe I'll take it back to like what I was saying earlier, which is like maybe take a minute. Okay. Maybe my advice would be take a few minutes to spend some time articulating what are the drivers for why you run right now as like a starting point. But then the second piece to that is how is the way you're running right now achieving that, which is to come back to what we've spoken about already, like that honest conversation. So are you achieving like what is truly important for you to get out of running through the way that you're approaching it? Because I think that running, because it's such a boom right now and it's a trendy thing, it's very easy to get caught up in like, oh, I just have to do this because this is what everyone is doing and it's sort of all converging. Whereas like stepping back, being like, why am I doing this? What is important for me to get out of it? How is the way that I am approaching this, achieving that outcome? I think if more people did that, they'd run for longer, they'd get more out of it. I think it's good exercise.
I think that's probably valuable to do for a lot of people, particularly if they're at that kind of tension point of maybe the running is starting to feel a bit much or they're enjoying doing it, but trying to make it fit in and all that kind of stuff. So coming back and going, all right, why am I doing this? And where do I need to set my priorities? I think that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a great conversation, as I anticipated it might be. We probably went on some diatribes that people are not going to find that interesting, but I'm sure we both enjoyed it at the time. So that's the main thing, right?
Yeah,
Indeed.
No, thank you for having me. I loved that chat.
That's cool. It's cool. And so you've got Melbourne Marathon coming up, which is just 6.5 weeks away now.
6.5 weeks.
Which is pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Are there any exciting, cheeky things coming up as well?
Oh, that's a good question. We do around Melbourne Marathon. We're partnered with Lululemon at the moment, and around Melbourne Marathon, there's a heap of activations and runs to come along to and that sort of thing, which will be awesome. I mean, that's really what like this current season will wrap up after that. So I feel like this season's all sort of building towards that, and then we'll reevaluate for the end of the year. But yes, I mean, I'll plug cheeky. Like if you're listening, follow along, have a listen to the podcast, follow us on Instagram, follow the Substack, get around it.
Beautiful. I'm sure there'll be a few people that might find it interesting and follow your journey for Melbourne as well. Hopefully you stay fit and healthy. Doesn't sound like we've had that much luck so far. So the next 6.5 weeks, lock in.
You're
going to be good to go.
That's what it's all about. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Phoebe. Thanks for listening to Execs Who Run. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And better yet, share it with a friend or colleague who runs as well. You can find more stories and episodes at execswhorun.com or follow us along on Instagram or LinkedIn. Just search Execs Who Run. Also, you can join our Strava group to connect with other listeners on the run. Thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to bringing you the next conversation very soon.